In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Okay, so where are we now?
Second scene.
Right. So what point of the story are we? What's just happened?
Well, as I recall, the last time we were here, I think we talked about, that they wanted to fight each other to see who will become king of Israel, and ultimately said that have Jonathan not died, probably he would have been the king.
Right. Okay. So we're at a point now where Saul is out of the picture. David has done. What did David do in chapter 2? The first thing after Saul died, what did he do to kind of like make a first step of like being king?
He asked God, what do you want me to do?
Right, he asked him. And he asked him specifically a question. What did he ask God?
Where should I go?
Where should I go among these cities of Judah? Right? Because he was from the tribe of Judah, and he knew that the tribe of Judah would be the one that's most likely to accept him as being king, because this was not the normal thing that would happen. Normally it would be one of the descendants of Saul that would become king, but the tribe of Judah would be more agreeable to David because he's from the tribe of Judah.
When David was a young boy and was living by his father Jesse, I thought they have a vision and they have some guideline from God that he should be the new king. And King Saul knows that, that's why he got depressed and all the story. Yeah, so it was well accepted that David was going to be the new king. Why the fuss right around who's going to be the new king? They knew that David is. And this was a commandment of God.
So it's one thing to know that, David, when he was a child, he was anointed to be king, versus right now you're in this situation and to actually accept that David is going to become king. So when we read it in the Bible, like it all seems kind of like, 1, 2, 3, one after the other. But so many years have passed, and people aren't necessarily thinking in that way. They're not necessarily thinking, oh, you know what, David, when he was a young boy, he was anointed to be king, so he must be the king now. There's still people vying for power. There's always going to be people that want to, that want to do something that's best for them. So essentially, when we're reading about Abner, who was the commander of the army of King Saul, he is now kind of the one in charge. I mean, he's kind of the most senior person in the kingdom who's aware of what's going on, aware of like the procedures, aware of like has connections, and so he is the one who decided that he wants to go and get Ishbosheth, which was one of Saul's sons, to make him the king. And of course, maybe that he would have been next in line, because we know that Jonathan died, so we know that he maybe would have been next in line. But what is really the motivation of Abner? Maybe Abner is thinking about himself. I want to retain my position, and so on. So there's always other reasons beyond, well, what is it that God wants? And that's a good point, because maybe if all of us, the only thing we had in our mind is what is it that God wants, then things would be a lot clearer and a lot simpler. But because we all have like an internal struggle that we have our own will, that sometimes we forget about what God wants, and we forget about what God has said, or we think that was something so long ago, maybe it doesn't even apply anymore. So that's a good question. But yeah.
And as he said, historically, the king's descendants usually take the throne after the king dies.
Right.
And until now, still. In the UK and everywhere.
Yeah.
The kids always first online.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the only time that you'll find that a different dynasty comes and takes the throne is because there's been a war. And actually, that's what's happening now. There's a war that's happening. Judah accepts King David as being the king of only Judah. And all the other 11 tribes, they don't accept David as the king. They accept Ishbosheth, which is Saul's son, as being the king. So in the last chapter, we saw there was a battle that happened essentially between Israel and Judah. And Abner, the king of the army of Saul, and Joab, who was the king of the army of David, they essentially met together, and there was this battle that happened. And do you remember Joab killed somebody? Or sorry, Abner killed somebody. Who was it that he killed?
Joab?
No.
Saul?
No. Abner is the commander of the army of Saul. So when Abner and Joab met together, and they had they said let the young men compete. So essentially they're having a battle between. They had 12 men from Saul's side and 12 men from King David, and they fought. And then at the end it says they all died. I mean, essentially everybody was injured. And then what happened is there was a man whose name was Asahel. Asahel was chasing after Abner and wanted to kill him. But Abner ended up killing Asahel. And so Asahel is who? Who is he related to?
Joab's nephew?
Joab's brother. Right? So you have these three men. Joab, he was the commander of the army of David. Then you have Asahel, his brother, and he has a third brother whose name is Abishai. Okay? So Abner kills Joab. Okay? Sorry. Abner kills Asahel, who was Joab's brother. And so now Joab has a vendetta against him. Okay? And we're going to read about this vendetta today. Okay? So we're now at this point where there's kind of this divided kingdom.
But towards the end of it, isn't it everyone, didn't they agree to let's talk about this kind of thing? Everyone calm down?
Well, they agreed to stop the battle that was happening. They agreed to do that because at that point they were saying, well, there's just gonna be more casualties and so on. So they agreed to stop the battle. But there's been no resolution. I mean, there's still a divided kingdom, and King David is still only king of Judah and so on. So we're going to read more about kind of how that story progresses.
Do you know around how old David is now?
No, I'm not sure. Now there was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David. But David grew stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. And again, this is by the providence of God. I mean, again, God is the one who has said that David is going to be king. And just as all throughout David's life, God is working in his life, preparing him and preparing the way before him for him to become king. Now you have this man, David, who started from nothing. He was a fugitive, him by himself. And then he grew to have hundreds of men following him, and more people kept joining him until now he finds himself to be the king of Judah, and now more people are following him, and he's gaining more power, and so on, until finally he's going to become king. You see, the process of his reign and rising to power is by the work of God in his life. And here as well, David is growing stronger and stronger because God is with him. Sons were born to David in Hebron. His firstborn was Amnon by Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, his second Chileab by Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, the third Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, the fourth Adonijah, the son of Haggith, the fifth Shephatiah, the son of Abital, and the sixth Ithream by David's wife Eglah. These were born to David in Hebron. So you see, David's wives have multiplied. Before we were reading that he had 2 wives, and then he had a third wife from Saul's daughter who wasn't really actively his wife because he wasn't with her, and now he has more and more wives. Now it was so, while there was war between the house of Saul and the house of David, that Abner was strengthening his hold on the house of Saul. So again, remember, Abner has a lot to gain, and Abner is in a very powerful position, and so he wants to maintain that power. This conflict that actually happened between both houses, the house of Saul and the house of David, lasted about 2 years, just to kind of give you a sense of time. And Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Aiha. So Ishbosheth. I was going to ask, what is a concubine?
Yeah, me too. I never heard of this word.
Yeah, what is a concubine?
A slave. I don't know. It's a helper girl.
Helper girl?
Yeah. But there also were there was some marital relationship there.
Yeah. That's essentially what it was. It wasn't like a wife. It was like a lower rank than a wife. But essentially it was for the sexual pleasure of the man. Okay, so someone could have many concubines. Like for instance, King Solomon, he had 800 wives and concubines together. Right? So people would get concubines just kind of as a I can't say it any other way. I mean, just for to satisfy the sexual desire of someone, they would have concubines. Because at the time, women were treated like objects, and they were treated like property, right? So there was no other reason for to have the concubines. Actually, who are other famous people that we know that have had concubines? Even far earlier than this. Abraham had concubine, right? So, I mean, I'm sure the concubines, they did more, like they were servants in the house, so they did things, but it was known that the owner, the master of the concubine, would also have sexual relations with her. Okay, so it wasn't just like any servant. She could do service, she could do work in the house, but also that was one of her roles.
So why was it a big deal that Abraham did sleep with Hagar, or was it Hagar?
Right.
Because like if she was his concubine already, like why did Sarah tell him? I mean, maybe that's off topic though.
Well, the issue had to do with why he did it. He did it because he was trying to get the son of promise through her, even though God had told him that he would come through Sarah. That was why. Not the fact that he slept with his concubine, because that was already going on. It was the fact that the specific reason why he did it and the desire of it was to get the son of promise whom God said would come through Sarah. Okay. Yeah.
So, and God was okay with that? I mean,
no.
Abraham had it, I mean,
it was, no.
It's always mentioned.
The command of God has always been that there is a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and that's all. But because of the weakness of the people, all throughout the Old Testament, God tolerated it. So for instance, when you look at divorce even, okay, when the New Testament, when speaking about Moses gave you a concession who allowed you to divorce, not because that was the will of God, but because it was a concession for you and your weakness that this was allowed. But it's not that God has changed. It's not like divorce was okay in the Old Testament and it's not okay in the New Testament. Actually, in the book of, I think it's Malachi, it says God hates divorce, right? So the command hasn't changed, but God's tolerance to the weakness of man and his expectation of what man can do is changing, because in the New Testament we have the grace of the Holy Spirit. In the New Testament we have the ability to overcome these base desires and be able to live in a monogamous relationship, and that's the expectation. And if we break that, then there's consequences. Whereas in the Old Testament, people broke this all the time. You see, King David had multiple wives. That's not how it's supposed to be. But really, at no point in the Old Testament were people criticized for this, because it was just kind of a practice that was done out of weakness. Yeah.
Is that where like some churches get polygamy these days? Like,
yeah, like the Mormons.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a practice that existed in the Old Testament.
Besides David, he sinned and he submitted to God in Psalm 50. He mentioned so many times about sins.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But that's for specifically the forgive me my sins.
He admitted the sins.
That's specifically talking about the sin with Bathsheba, right? So his specific sins that he's talking about there had to do with like when he committed sin with Bathsheba and he killed her husband and so on. Like that was the context. Okay. So what's happening here? It says, and Saul had a concubine whose name was Rizpah, the daughter of Ai. So Ishbosheth said to Abner, "Why have you gone into my father's concubine?" What's happening here, and why is it relevant?
I guess so. Rizpah was Saul's concubine. Saul is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I guess Abner is like consolidating his power and also maybe taking the place of Saul and sort of taking over that concubine. And
Ishbosheth's noticing.
Hmm?
Ishbosheth is noticing.
Is noticing, yeah. So the fact that Abner would go and take Saul's concubine, essentially, like you said, it's making him kind of in the place of Saul. Because remember, concubine is property. Concubine is property. So if I go take the property of the king, then essentially I'm making myself to be the king. I'm taking that power and that control like for myself. Okay? So it was a big deal. It was a big deal to do that. So Ishbosheth is accusing Abner. Is accusing Abner of this. Then Abner became very angry at the words of Ishbosheth and said, "Am I a dog's head that belongs to Judah? Today I show loyalty to the house of Saul your father, to his brothers and to his friends, and have not delivered you into the hand of David. And you charge me today with the fault concerning this woman?" So he's denying it. He's denying that this happened, and kind of in a more foundational way, he's offended that he would be accused of disloyalty. And he's saying, I have been loyal to Saul and to you, Ishbosheth, who was Saul's son, all throughout, and now you're accusing me of this. And we don't know specifically what the evidence was, that would lead Ishbosheth to believe that this is something that Abner did, and we really never know like what really happened. Did this really happen or not? But the main focus here is the offense that Abner feels toward Ishbosheth for this accusation. Okay. So now you're going to see Abner, who has been loyal to Saul all throughout. Abner, who's been trying to consolidate his power all throughout. Abner, who's doing all this stuff all throughout. And now suddenly, like 180-degree change in Abner because of this circumstance that happened now. So now he's saying what? May God do so to Abner, and more also, if I do not do for David as the Lord has sworn to him. So now Abner is saying to Ishbosheth, because you've accused me of this, and you've accused me of being disloyal to Saul, now I am actually going to help David. I'm going to help David. And David, like David, who is your enemy, David who's trying to take the throne from you, I'm now going to go to his side, and I'm actually going to help him. To transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and to set up the throne of David over Israel and over Judah from Dan to Beersheba. Okay, so that the rest of the tribes that are not currently controlled by David are now I'm going to work to bring them to David so that David would be the king of all of the tribes. And he could not answer Abner another word because he feared him. You see, there's a big difference in Ishbosheth and Saul. Saul was very aggressive. You know, you can imagine if somebody had said something like this to Saul, Saul would have just killed him. And he's not going to tolerate someone who is talking to the king like this, telling him, I'm going to go to your enemy, and I'm going to make him increase in power, and all this. But instead of Ishbosheth, you know, reprimanding Abner, disciplining Abner, killing Abner, he just was silent and was afraid of him. Right? He didn't take any action. See, Ishbosheth was not a very strong king. He was not at all like King Saul was. Then Abner sent messengers on his behalf to David, saying, whose is the land? Saying also, make your covenant with me, and indeed my hand shall be with you to bring all Israel to you. So Abner sends this message to David, essentially wanting to reconcile with him, wanting to make peace with him, offering him to help him. Okay? And David said, good, I will make a covenant with you. But one thing I require of you, you shall not see my face unless you first bring Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come to see my face. Okay, so what is the condition that David agrees?
To bring his first wife.
Right, Michal. And because this is his first wife. This is the wife that he had at the very beginning, who was Saul's daughter. And why does he want her now?
Political power.
How?
Because it's all
right. So David is actually related to the king. Maybe he's not like a blood relative of the king, but he's related to him. So this is also helping him to gain power. This is helping him to gain legitimacy, so that people are going to see, well, no, I'm not just some rebellious person who's coming to attack Saul. I'm actually of the house of Saul myself. And to have Michal, Saul's daughter, with him is kind of more of a symbol that he is legitimate and that he is the rightful king. So David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, Saul's son, saying, give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for 100 foreskins of the Philistines. He's responding to Abner, saying, okay, I will agree with you, but you have to give me Michal. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from her husband, from Palatiel, the son of Laish. Now again, look at what Ishbosheth is doing. Ishbosheth, okay, who is the enemy of David, who is a very weak king, who is intimidated by Abner, he's essentially just giving in to this request. Okay, saying, okay, you want your wife? I'll give you your wife. Okay, doesn't seem like the smartest thing for him to do if he's really interested in maintaining his authority and his power in the kingdom.
Michael is cool with it. Michal. Okay.
She doesn't have a say. Yeah. And then look at this. Then her husband went along with her to Bahurim, weeping behind her. So Abner said to him, go return, and he returned. Now keep in mind that Michal was actually David's wife. So this marriage here to this man, Palatiel, was illegitimate. It's an illegitimate marriage. Because she could not have married him because she was already married to David. Now Abner had communicated with the elders of Israel, saying, in time past, you were seeking for David to be king over you. So what is he doing now? Abner is now going to use his influence, okay, to communicate to all of the tribes of Israel to bring them to support David, to speak about David, to convince them to accept David as being their king. So he's writing this communication, like these probably letters, to the elders of Israel, spread out through all the tribes, and he's saying, in time past, you were seeking for David to be king over you. Now then, do it. For the Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. Okay, where is this said when he's saying this? The Lord has spoken of David, saying, by the hand of my servant David, I will save my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and the hand of all their enemies. Where is that recorded?
So when he was anointed, maybe?
No, but that's a good guess. It's actually not recorded anywhere. And that kind of tells us something. It reminds us that, one, not everything that's important and relevant is recorded in the Bible. The Bible records a fraction of a percent of everything that actually happens. Okay, so sometimes we think that when something doesn't appear in the Bible, then it's not true, or something that we hear about it some other way, then maybe it's not authentic. No, actually, here there's many times where people in the Bible quote things that actually are not anywhere written in the Bible. They're written in other books. They're written in something else. So here, Abner is saying that the Lord had said this at some point, and we don't know exactly when this was said. The closest thing that is recorded in the Bible that's similar to this was actually said to Saul, when Saul was anointed to be king. In 1 Samuel chapter 9. He said, tomorrow about this time I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin, speaking about Saul, and you shall anoint him commander over my people Israel, that he may save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked upon my people, because their cry has come to me. This was said about Saul. Now, on the one hand, you might be able to say that such a statement is being said about the king. Like, it is the role of the king to be commander over Israel and to save my people from the land of the Philistines, from the hand of the Philistines. And this is what King David is doing, just as Saul was doing before. But this was never specifically said anywhere about David.
Yeah.
And Abner also spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Then Abner also went to speak in the hearing of David in Hebron, all that seemed good to Israel and the whole house of Benjamin. Okay, so Abner used his influence to foster support for David among all of the tribes of Israel. This is like what we said. He spoke in the hearing of Benjamin specifically. Why is it mentioned Benjamin? He spoke in the hearing of Benjamin. Like, what's unique of all the tribes of Israel? Like, what's unique about Benjamin?
The tribe of Saul.
Right, the tribe of Saul. That's the tribe that would be the most difficult for them to accept King David. I mean, imagine if your house is the one who the king is from your house. It kind of elevates your house, your tribe as being special somehow. Okay? And now they're going to have to accept that Saul is not going to be king, and his son is not going to be king, and none of the Benjamites are going to be king, but instead the king is going to be somebody from a different tribe. Okay, so for Abner to be able to convince the Benjamites of this is not like a small thing. This is a pretty important and big thing. Okay, so they would have to reject their own tribe from being king so that he could accept David to be the king. Also, what's interesting is that Abner himself is from the tribe of Benjamin. Okay, so Abner could actually, again, kind of talk to the Benjamites in a way that they would understand, in a way that they would accept, because he is from their tribe. So Abner and 20 men with him came to David at Hebron, and David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Okay, so Abner came to David to visit him, and David had a feast for him. Now remember, Abner is like considered the enemy. He's coming into Hebron, into the land of Judah, and he's coming to kind of make peace with David, even though he's not the king. King Ishbosheth, he is still where he is. Then Abner said to David, I will arise and go and gather all Israel to my lord the king, that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. So David sent Abner away, and he went in peace. Okay, so he's essentially confirming what he said to David. He's saying, I'm going to go, and I'm going to talk to all of Israel and all the elders of Israel, and they're going to make a covenant with you, and that you may reign over all that your heart desires. And this is, like, you really have to begin to wonder, why is Abner doing this? You know, maybe he feels at this point that, you know, he feels like David is going to inevitably become king, and that Ishbosheth is not a very strong king. He's not going to remain king, and he wants to be close to the king. He wants to be close to the person who is in power. So I'm going to go and help you so that now I can have an important position in the kingdom. Okay, I'm going to have an important position. At that moment, the servants of David and Joab came from a raid and brought much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David in Hebron, for he had sent him away and had gone in peace. Okay, so when David and Abner had this meeting, Joab was not there. Now remember, what is Joab's relationship with Abner? Revenge. Why? What happened with Abner and Joab?
Killed his brother.
He killed his brother. So Abner killed Joab's brother, whose name is Asahel. Okay? So remember, Joab hates Abner. And Joab and Abner are like peers. The commander of the army of David and the commander of the army of Saul. So Abner came to the place where Joab is, but Joab happened to not be there at the time, and he's coming to make this deal. Okay, so Joab comes back from this raid he's on, and he's like shocked. He's like, what happened? Like, Abner was just here, and you made a deal with him that he's gonna help you to become the king, and all of this stuff. When Joab and all the troops that were with him had come, they told Joab, saying, Abner, the son of Ner, came to the king, and he sent him away, and he has gone in peace. Okay, so Joab now is going to become very angry. Then Joab came to the king and said, what have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why is it that you sent him away, and he has already gone? Surely you realize that Abner, the son of Ner, came to deceive you, to know you're going out and you're coming in, and to know all that you are doing. Okay, so what is Joab implying? He's a spy. He's saying Abner's a spy. Why would Abner come and want to make peace with you? He just wants to come to see us, to know what we're doing, to be able to attack us, okay, to know our weaknesses. And when Joab had gone from David's presence, he sent messengers after Abner, who brought him back from the well of Sirah. But David did not know it. So Joab on his own, he went and he found Abner as he was traveling back to his home, and they brought him. Okay, they captured him without David knowing, because remember, Joab wants revenge against Abner. Now when Abner had returned to Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gate to speak with him privately, and there stabbed him in the stomach, so that he died for the blood of Asahel, his brother. Okay, so Joab killed Abner. Afterward, when David heard it, he said, my kingdom and I are guiltless before the Lord forever of the blood of Abner, the son of Ner. Let it rest on the head of Joab and on all his father's house, and let there never fail to be in the house of Joab one who has a discharge, or is a leper, who leans on a staff, or falls by the sword, or lacks bread. What is he saying?
He's putting a curse on his descendants.
Yes, but how can he do that? Like, how can David put a curse on his descendants, and why does David have the authority to do that? And I mean, if we tried to do that today, then, I mean, what would we say? Right? If I try to put a curse on my enemies, I mean, that doesn't seem like something that would be pleasing to God, right? So in what way can David do this?
Well, isn't that back when, what was it, Jacob? It was Isaac, Esau, and what was his brother's name? Was it Jacob?
Jacob.
Yeah, so they gave the blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember their father was able to give them like a verbal blessing, and that was considered like power back then. Like you verbally blessing your children, or you verbally cursing your children, that you had a power.
Yeah.
I just remember that that was I guess a power from God.
So that was like a gift given to like the patriarchs of Israel as a way of like Like, God gave them the ability to bless, and that through the blessing, like, the nation that would come from that person would actually be in power and be blessed and so on. But they didn't curse.
Oh.
They didn't curse. So, I mean, for instance, Isaac blessed Jacob, but he didn't curse Esau in a curse. Now, there are cases where there are curses that are being said, but who is the source? Let me put it that way. Who is the source of blessing? God is the source of blessing. So who's the source of curse?
Lack of God.
The lack of God. So can God put curses on people?
Yes.
Yes. And he has put curses. He curses people who are disobedient to him. Okay? So what David is actually repeating here is the curses that God has said for people who are murderers. Okay, for people who are disobedient to God. It's not David who's placing such a curse. He's just repeating all the things that God has said all throughout for people that are murderers and people that kill. Right? People who are disobedient and rebellious against God. This is what God says is going to happen. They're going to be cursed. Something's going to happen to them. So it's not like David is doing this on his own. Okay? It's not like David is saying this on his own. So Joab and Abishai, his brother, killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel at Gibeon in the battle. So it sounds like Abishai also was involved in this. Then David said to Joab and to all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes, gird yourselves with sackcloth, and mourn for Abner." And King David followed the coffin. So you see, David is very upset about this idea that Abner has been killed. Okay? And actually, this verse is the very first time that we read that the Bible actually specifically calls David King David. Okay, it's like at this point he is acknowledged to be king. Before this, it's always been David, David, David only. And David is very sensitive to this. Like, he feels like this is like this man Abner came, and David agreed to kind of go with his plan, and he agreed to shelter him. He agreed to reconcile with him and make peace with him. And this person, who was his commander, on his own, operated on his own, and he went and he killed him. Okay? So it's very distressing for David that this happened. So they buried Abner in Hebron, and the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king sang a lament over Abner and said, so actually like composes like a song of lamentation and mourning over Abner. Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, nor were your feet put in fetters. As a man falls before the wicked men, so you fell. Then all the people wept over him again. So it's like there was a general mourning about Abner. You can see the difference between the way that Joab thinks and the way that King David thinks. King David is waiting for God to act. In everything we see, King David is waiting for God. Anyone who is his enemy, quote unquote, he doesn't go try to kill him. He just waits. He waits for God to work. He waits God to put an end to that person so that he would eventually become king. King David didn't feel like he needed to take any kind of swift action in order for him to eliminate the competition. To eliminate Abner, who was, and Ishbosheth, who were the people that were kind of standing in his way to become king. He said, no, I'm not going to kill him. Why would I go kill him? God is going to do according to what his plan is and what he wants to do. The same attitude he had about Saul, the same attitude he's had his entire life. He never felt like he had to prove anything. He never felt that he had to kill anyone, to take revenge on anyone, or to remove any obstacle in his way. But in every way, he just lets things go. Okay? Joab, on the other hand, he sees Abner as, he's the one who killed my brother, so I have to go and eliminate him. I have to go kill him. And when all the people came to persuade David to eat food while it was still day, David took an oath, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down. So he's actually like honoring Abner in his memory by fasting, by not eating anything the rest of the day. Now all the people took note of it, and it pleased them, since whatever the king did pleased all the people. For all the people and all Israel understood that day that it had not been the king's intent to kill Abner the son of Ner. Then the king said to his servants, do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? Like, he's praising him. He actually, remember what did he say about King Saul when King Saul died?
That he was like pleasant or something like that.
Yeah, he was pleasant, and that he was successful, and he was, a good king, and all these things that David said about King Saul. And here again, he's praising Abner, after his death. And then this verse is interesting. It says, "And I am weak today, though anointed king, and these men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too harsh for me. The Lord shall repay the evildoer according to his wickedness." Okay, so who are the sons of Zeruiah?
Joab and his brother?
Yes. So Joab and Asahel and Abishai are the sons of Zeruiah. So we know Asahel is dead. So just Joab and Abishai. They're the ones that concocted the plan to kill Abner. Okay? Look again at King David's response and like the restraint that he has. He is so upset about what they did. They did it behind his back. They didn't take his permission. It had such a negative impact on the whole nation that everyone is mourning for him. King David could have easily gone and killed them for what it is that they did. And yet, instead of that, he's saying, these men are too harsh. These men don't do things the way that I do them. But King David did not go to the extent of killing them, of punishing them. But who is it that he did kill? When someone kills people from the house of Saul, and they come to David and they say, look, we killed these people from the house of Saul, he gets so upset because they disobeyed the command of God that he kills them. Right? The motivation that he has, like the things that makes him angry, is what we call a righteous anger. He was angry for righteous reasons. He was angry because people disobey God. He was not angry when somebody offends him personally, which is maybe the opposite of what we do. We get angry because people offend us, because people disobey us, because our pride is hurt, because someone like that Joab who did not follow our instructions. Maybe we would get angry and be driven to want to do something like killing him. But King David did not. King David, his type of anger was always a righteous anger. I'm angry because someone is disobeying God, who is dishonoring God, who is blaspheming God, who is touching the anointed of God. And this tells us something about why God says about David that he's a man after my own heart. King David cared about the things of God. He cared about what God cared about. And he didn't care about his own person or how is it that he personally was treated. So you see here, he doesn't do anything to them. He just lets them be. Any questions about this chapter before we go on to the next one?
Wasn't Zeruiah David's brother? Was Joab David's nephew?
Is Joab David's nephew?
I think we said that last week. Maybe I'm wrong.
No.
Someone was.
Abner is Saul's nephew, I think.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, chapter 4. When Saul's son heard that Abner had died in Hebron, he lost heart, and all Israel was troubled. Okay, why would Ishbosheth lose heart when Abner died? Like, why would he be very upset that Abner died?
He was the one with the connections, right?
He was the one with the connections, and he was the one in command of the military. So, I mean, if you can imagine Ishbosheth, like, if somebody came and attacked Israel right now, what was Ishbosheth going to do? I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of experience or knowledge of how to command the army, of how things worked. I mean, he's going to have to rely on people that are in power and that are well-connected people that know how things work to help him. And right now, Abner's gone. But you see also that, even though Ishbosheth accused Abner of this, he's by no means happy that he's gone. He's upset. He lost heart. He's very depressed and afraid because Abner is gone. Now Saul's son had 2 men who were captains of troops. Saul's son again is Ishbosheth. He's the king. The name of one was Baanah, and the name of the other was Rechab, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, of the children of Benjamin. For Beeroth also was part of Benjamin, because the Beerothites fled to Gittim and have been sojourners there until this day. Jonathan, Saul's son, had a son who was lame in his feet. He was 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, and his nurse took him up and fled. And it happened as she made haste to flee that he fell and became lame. His name was Mephibosheth. Okay, so it's speaking about here that Saul's grandson, who was the son of Jonathan, he was an infant, he was 5 years old. At the time when Saul and Jonathan died in battle, when the nurse of the child of Mephibosheth was like fleeing and taking him away, he fell and he hurt himself and he became lame. Okay? So it's kind of giving us this background. Also, it's telling us that Ishbosheth had 2 men working under him who were captains of troops. Now remember, Abner was like the commander of the army. So these 2 men, Baanah and Rechab, their boss was Abner. Now that Abner is out of the way, these men take it upon themselves to start acting independently. Okay? There's nobody really who is following up with them. And what is it that they decide to do? The sons of Rimmon, the Beerothite, Rechab and Baanah, set out and came at about the heat of the day to the house of Ishbosheth, who was lying on his bed at noon. And they came there all the way into the house, as though to get wheat. And they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and Baanah, his brother, escaped. Right, so now that Abner was gone, like they didn't have faith in Ishbosheth as a king. And they went and they killed him. For when they came into the house, he was lying on his bed in his bedroom. Then they struck him and killed him, beheaded him, and took his head, and were all night escaping through the plain. And they brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron, and said to the king, Here is the head of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, your enemy, who sought your life, and the Lord has avenged my lord the king this day of Saul and his descendants. So you see, there's like this tendency now of all the people that are in the house of Saul, they're wanting to go help David. First, Abner goes and he says, I'm going to help David to become the king. And now these men, they go and they try to help David become the king. And everyone, again, is thinking about themselves. Okay? These men, realizing that Ishbosheth is an incompetent king, that he's not going to be a good king, he's a coward. They know that he's not going to maintain power in Israel for long. And now that Abner is gone, it's even more difficult. So they decided, okay, we know that David is going to be the king. Let's go help him and let's go accelerate this process. And he's going to show us favor because we're the ones that are coming to do this. They're essentially eliminated the one remaining obstacle for him to become king of all of Israel, which is by killing Ishbosheth. Similar to previous people who believed that when they would kill people in the house of Saul, that David would be delighted and happy and reward them, they did the same thing, thinking that David was going to like this and that he was going to reward them. And so they went to David and they brought the head of Ishbosheth. But it said this, David answered Rechab and Baanah his brother, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, and said to them, As the Lord lives, who has redeemed my life from all adversity, when someone told me, saying, Look, Saul is dead, thinking to have brought good news, I arrested him and had him executed in Ziklag, the one who I thought would give him a reward for his news. So he's saying what? Previously, when people came and told me stories about killing Saul and all these things, thinking that they were telling me something I wanted to hear, I arrested him and executed him. Okay? And now you think that when you come and tell me you killed the king, that I'm going to be pleased with you? How much more when wicked men have killed a righteous person in his own house on his bed? Okay, so you went and you killed this man who was helpless and defenseless lying in bed. Okay, so I'm going to even be more upset because you killed this person while they were defenseless. Therefore, shall I not now require his blood at your hand and remove you from the earth? Again, like the same principle here that we've seen so many times in the life of King David, David thinks differently than everybody else. Nobody thinks like David. No one. No one has this mindset that I'm trying to protect my enemies, that I'm trying to make sure that we don't mistreat them, that I'm trying to make sure that I don't disobey the command of God when I deal with them, even though they're an obstacle to me. And so everyone is perplexed at the way that David responds to this. Nobody could have ever believed that David was going to be upset that they're killing King Ishbosheth. So David commanded his young men, and they executed them, cut off their hands and feet, and hanged them by the pool in Hebron. But they took the head of Ishbosheth and buried it in the tomb of Abner in Hebron. So it's like they're giving Ishbosheth like an honorable burial, but these men that killed him, they're just hanging him for everyone to see. So again, we see like this is the transition now. The transition that's happening from first the kingdom of Saul to this divided kingdom where there is both King David and King Ishbosheth, until finally we see that King David is going to become king of all of Israel. Any questions or comments about these two chapters?
So just to clarify, so I understand that David was done about Abner being killed. That's obvious. But I want to know, do you think, or put it this way, why do you think Abner, or before they killed Abner, why didn't Abner ask them, guys, why are you gonna kill me? I mean, I'm gonna do something with David, and David told me that, David told me or I told David that I was gonna help him do something. So why are you guys killing me?
The people that killed Abner were not killing him because they necessarily were upset that he's meeting with David. They killed him because he killed his brother. So Joab is the person who killed Abner. Abner had killed Joab's brother. So Joab was coming to get revenge. So it wasn't about having an explanation or a conversation. He just wanted him dead because he hated him.
Okay, I understand that, but instead of killing Abner, well, why did they add them in the first place? Abner, why did you kill our
brother?
Our brother.
Well, we don't know what the conversations they had were. Like I said, not everything is recorded in the Bible. So there might have been such a conversation, and they, and they might have talked about it. I mean, but in the end, that's what happened. Is Joab killed Abner? Okay.
But Abner, wasn't he slept with Saul's concubine, and that was already wrong, and then he lied about it?
Well, we don't know if we slept with her or not.
Oh, I thought we slept with her.
I mean, he was accused of doing it, but there's no information about whether it already happened. But even if he had, that wouldn't have been the reason for Joab to kill him. It would have been the reason for Ishbosheth to kill him, because Ishbosheth is the one who is now the king. So for him to do that, he's essentially going behind Ishbosheth and taking something that's not his. But we see the opposite. So Ishbosheth was afraid of Abner, didn't want to respond to him or say anything, but Joab was coming to attack him for a completely different reason. Yeah.
But why? I mean, if David avenged the death or punished, I should say, those two murderers, he know, or he should have known that all these individuals would have been targets. And all these people are loyal to him. And, out of maybe misunderstood intent, they think that they're doing good, but really they're doing bad. Why wouldn't David have just maybe issued a decree or announced, hey, don't go after these guys, leave them alone? I mean, isn't inaction on David's part, almost...
So David was operating under the understanding that this was... this should have been obvious to everyone, because he would always say, how dare you touch the Lord's anointed? So he said, you're the Lord's anointed, you're the king. In the eyes of God, you are the king of Israel, you're anointed by God to be the king. And so what more decree do you need? All right, that was his mindset. His mindset was no one should dare touch these people, not because I, the king, say so. It's not like I'm the one who's deciding that. It's because God has said this. It would be the same like if King David goes and repeats all the commandments of God and tells the people, oh, by the way, obey this and obey this and obey this. So I think from King David's perspective, because you can see how his viewpoint is so different from everybody else. Like his understanding is that this should be just clear. Like don't do this. And it's not clear whether his reputation has kind of spread, because this has happened several times in the past where people did this and they were punished. But but clearly David has a different perspective on this than everyone. Okay. Glory be to God forever.